Let's head into some vintage stock stores and see if we can figure out why their prices are so all over the place. First off, I checked out the PS5 section. It was pretty basic. Then this is the kind of more expensive glass case with like PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation Vita stuff, as well as controllers. And the first thing that caught my eye were these PS5 controllers that were $60, even though they weren't worth like $40, which blew my mind. But even crazier was down below where they had these controllers for $90 for a 2-pack, and a 2-pack on price charting was only worth 30 bucks. This PS3 was a little harder to figure out, but for $230, the console's worth around 80, so I don't know if those 35 games were actually worth the other 150 price, but their consoles are expensive. Just look at these Xbox Series X. They wanted $100 more than this thing was actually worth, which is blowing my mind. As well as this NCAA football was $120 when it's really worth around $40. Then you've got Godzilla Save the Earth, which was way overpriced. But the biggest, craziest price was 250 bucks for this complete in-box Donkey Kong Country. It's worth like 70, but they're charging 250, which just blows my mind. And right next to that was a bunch of Nintendo 64 games, with Mario Kart 64 being 65 bucks when this is only worth around $40. And then I headed to the Switch section where I found Mario Kart Live for $80 when it's only worth 60 max. This Tokyo 2020 Olympics game is 20 bucks. It's worth around 10. Like, these prices are just astronomically insane. Headed over to the Wii section where they had a bunch of Wii Fit boards for $20 each. Now, I couldn't find just the board itself, but if you got the bundle, it was $15. So maybe like $10 for one of those boards is the most I would say, but this just actually blew my mind, and honestly, it shocked me that these prices at Vintage Stock were this high. I was hoping they wouldn't be this crazy. However, they were for some reason, and I'm not quite sure why. So let's go ahead and head to another Vintage Stock and see if the prices there are just as crazy or if they're more with the market. Some of these games being 2 or 3 times the price of what they should have been was absolutely unacceptable. And honestly, I don't know how a store like this stays open, but let's go ahead and head to that second store right now. Heading into the second Vintage Stock, I was hoping for better results than this. I headed over to the PS5 section right off the bat, and I did end up finding Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 for $40. However, when I looked this up, it's worth around $24 complete, as well as this Marvel Midnight Suns for $63. This caught my eye. This definitely looks like fun, but it's only worth around $30, which is half the price of what this was actually priced for. Then I headed over to the PlayStation 3 section, and as you can see here, there are a ton of awesome Guitar Hero games. However, all of these are $10 to $15 more expensive than they should be, so I got out of there and continued on looking, where I ended up finding this GameCube game, Mario Party 5, which was marked down to $5 more than it's actually worth, which was on sale. But if it's $30 more and then on sale for more, is it really on sale at that point? They did end up having 2 expensive games here, Chrono Trigger and Earthbound. These were actually, the loose price was actually what it was, which kind of shocked me. The Nintendo 64 section was a little different. Majora's Mask was $90. However, if you look it up, it's worth around $60. And then this stack of NES and Super Nintendo games as well was just a little too much. Now, I know these stores are brick and mortar stores, and they do have to price games a little more expensive in order to cover their overhead or their employees or stuff like that. However, when you're charging 2 or 3 times the price of a game, to me, that says your business is probably not doing well, and it just kind of puts a bad taste in my mouth. and probably other gamers' mouths as well, which probably means they're not going to go shopping at your establishment as much. But I will say the first shop had much more expensive overpriced games when it came to the expensive games. Whereas when I went to the second vintage stock, it seemed like the more common games were 2 or 3 times more. Whereas the expensive games, I'm looking at that Chrono Trigger and then the Earthbound, those were right on the price, which was kind of surprising to me. But then when I looked at like a $40 or $50 game for the Nintendo 64, they were $30, $40, $50 more than they should have been. If you go back into the video and watch some of those other games that I didn't highlight or talk about, you can see that there's a good $20 padding on all those games in the glass case compared to what they should be. And it even went more than that in some cases. Like that NCAA Football 14 that was marked at $120 for the Xbox 360 is only worth around $40 right now. Now, I do know that a few months ago, it was worth $100 to $120, but when we found out that the game was coming out and then the game subsequently did come out, that price tanked like crazy. And I feel like Vintage Stock, I got them confused because they both do this. They need to actually go back through and check their prices and value them. If a game went from $100 to $40, don't leave it in your glass case for $120 because it's going to sit there until they put it on sale for $100 and then down to $80 and then down to like $50 and then maybe someone will pick it up. But I don't know how this store stays open. Now, I did mention GameStop, and I want to preference that by saying I've actually gone into my local GameStop and found prices to be better than Vintage Stock, which blows my mind. But I think that's due to GameStop being online and being able to research the game prices before you go in, whereas Vintage Stock doesn't have any of that, at least in my area. Maybe it does in other areas. But these games are just way too expensive, and I could see people being turned away from retro gaming because when you walk in and find Majora's Mask that you've been wanting for the Nintendo 64 is almost $100 when they produced millions of those, when realistically it's a $50, $60 game. I could see why you wouldn't want to walk in that store again. And I will say the first Vintage Stock is actually a Vintage Stock I used to go to all the time when I was in high school. You can find some good deals there and it was actually worth it. But nowadays it's like way overpriced, and the only time you can find good deals is when you find those random games that are below like 20 bucks. Sometimes I'll go in there and I'll find a game that's worth 15 bucks and it'll be like 10 to 12, which is a deal. Obviously it's not a super deal, but finding stuff like that in a Vintage Stock is like a gold mine because you never find stuff like that. It's usually $5, $10, $15, $20 more. And then when you look at the glass cases, it's just astronomically higher. Like those PlayStation Move controllers, 2 of those on price charting are worth around $30. And this Vintage Stock was pricing them at $90, which just blows my mind. So I'd love to say I'd like to see Vintage Stock stay around, but honestly, every time I go in there, I find like one game, it's a PS3 game that's cheap, and then I get out of there because I don't want to overspend on games. That would not be a great way to have a game collection if I was always constantly overspending on games. So Vintage Stock is a big place in my area. There's only like 2 or 3 local game stores, and then the rest are like Vintage Stock or GameStop. So it's kind of a bummer to see things like this. However, there are still deals to be made out there. So go out, go game hunting, and find some deals for yourself. Do not settle for these double or triple overpriced games because you can go hunting and probably find them yourself for much cheaper. So I'm getting out of here, so check out that video out if you haven't already. But honestly, I was kind of disappointed. I loved going to Vintage Stock, and now it's just like I go in and browse and see what they have and then get out of there because it's just way overpriced. But what do you think? If you have a Vintage Stock in your area, or I think they're a moving trading company as well. Comment down below, let me know how they are in your area. But I'm getting out of here, so make sure you like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and check out that video out if you haven't already.